There once was a preacher, J. Mack, whose rhetorical skills were not slack. He caused many sensations with his dispensations. It's enough to bring R.C. Sproul back. We were sitting in a faculty meeting in the boardroom, couple of senior faculty just talking through some problems and issues, things that need to be fixed, and all of a sudden John kind of changed gears. He's kind of looking at the faculty the way he does, and we're like, uh-oh, what's coming? He says, there's this new thing, my buddy, my friend Al, Dr. Mueller, he's going to these conferences, and there's this, it's like the biggest thing in Christianity, and we've really got to make sure we get in on that, and it's like a classical, it's like a philosophical, and it's a liberal arts, but not liberal, and then it's like all this, and it's classical. Does anybody know anything about that? And I realize I'm about to get a lot more work. And all the faculty suddenly point at me as if I'm the only guy in a gray Wehrmacht uniform running around the beach on Normandy. Right? And they said, that guy right there. John said, do you know anything about that? I'm like, I've heard of it. New major. Can you start this year? And it's, mid-August. I said, John, I just started the Italy program, okay? I need 2 years to design this and think this through and build it and talk to all the wonderful people I know in the movement and figure out how to make this really, really work. And so I did that, and faculty approved it, and everything kind of went through, and the board approved it, and John approved it. And so David Goodwin said, do you think you could get John to come speak to us? And I said, sure. So the response was immediate. And he said, yes, I'll go. And as you saw in the little video the other day and today, we have ready to begin the Bachelor of Arts in Classical Liberal Arts, designed to teach your graduates and other people that want to come to Masters University, to teach you and train you and disciple you and mentor you and prepare these young people to go back into the classical schools as well-trained as they can possibly be. Because that's what the difficulty is. Most of us who teach, who have worked in these schools, who have developed these schools, we know that almost every person that comes to us did not get anything like this kind of an education, so they have to be retooled and retrained and sometimes deprogrammed, right, so that they will do what it is that we want to do. And we're all still figuring it out. This is so young, what we're doing. And if we don't reseed ourselves, if we don't take, like they do in the rice paddies in Southeast Asia, and take 10% of those seeds, and instead of eating them, we put them back in as seeds, it will not last. It will not last. And so that's what we're doing at Masters. So some of you on the ends and the corners of rows, if you look under your seats there, you'll see a little stack of these cards here. There's one right there, and there's some down here at the end. And if you all can kind of look around and pick those up and just start passing them down the rows, take these back, look at them, think about them, look at our website, watch the video 500 times so we're, can monetize that on YouTube. And hang it up in your schools and talk with your students. Anybody that you think will be a good teacher or is interested in being a teacher, you tell them about this program, have them email me. They'll come out here, we'll talk to them, we will teach them, we will train them, we will mentor them, and we will send them back to your school or another one of these wonderful schools, or they'll go out and start schools so that we can keep this wonderful thing going, because that's what we have to do. The philosopher Charles Taylor from McGill University wrote a wonderful book a couple years ago. I'm actually reading it embarrassingly for the first time. Most of my friends have already read it before, called A Secular Age. Some of you are no doubt familiar with it. And he has this, in the introduction, he has this marvelous line that just jumped out at me, and I went, on the plane, everyone's like, we're gonna die. No, I just excited about a line in a book. He said, humans have not conquered their nostalgia for something transcendent. Humans have not we have not yet conquered our nostalgia for something transcendent. This is a brilliant observation because it's so simple. And it's a brilliant observation with astounding explanatory power. Right? And most of us in here, as classes, probably know what nostalgia is. If you're my age, you look back at your youth when you could go up and down mountains and that everything wasn't feeling like there was a blowtorch on your knees and the bottom of your feet and so on and so forth, right? Nostalgia is related to the Greek word nostos, which means a journey home, right? The great example of that, of course, is Odysseus, right? Odysseus just wants to get home. What does he want to get home to? Not just Ithaca, not just his kingdom, not just his son Telemachus, although he loves him. He wants to get home to the beautiful woman that he loves and remembers and has essentially lost for a really, really long time. That's what a nostos is. That's what nostalgia is. It's a desire for something lost in the mists of the past, like the shards of Narsil in Rivendell. It's a desire to regain something lost, something more beautiful, more powerful, something greater and more glorious than this present shabby world. All of us feel a sense of nostalgia. That is part of the reason that we do what we do in these schools. We're not particularly interested in our schools about what's new. As I've gotten older, I've become more and more enamored of two little books, one by Longinus Pereihoupsos, On the Sublime, and another by Edmund Burke in the 18th century British philosopher, on his essay on the idea of the sublime. And the sublime, according to Longinus and Burke, kind of builds out the idea, is that which transports you. It often terrifies, it always awes, and it always draws you in, and it often does all of those things at the same time. If you've been to the Grand Canyon, or Yosemite Valley, or the Alps, if you've been in a desert, or you've been out to look at the ocean, or you've seen how gorgeous the plains are. I never understood why people say, oh, the Great Plains, so boring. What's boring? It's the simplest, most beautiful kind of landscape there is. It just screams infinity and those thunderstorms. And while we can't really quite fully define the idea of the sublime or sublimity, we all know what it is if we have lived for any length of time and if we've lived fully as humans. Because the experience of the sublime really is what we were made for. We were made to experience something, and I believe it's a person, that transcends us and transports us. Now, I'm 54. I've had a life filled for a little more than half a century of at least occasionally sublime moments. It doesn't usually involve sitting in traffic in Los Angeles. But many of us chase after these sublime moments, right? I like to climb high-altitude mountains and big rock walls and so on and so forth up in the Sierra. I've been in very, very deep forests. I've sailed my sailboat out on the Pacific Ocean. I've been in deserts. I've been in great cities like New York and Edinburgh, one of my favorite cities in the world, and Rome and Florence and Venice many, many times. And the most sublime city of them all, Jerusalem. But life isn't always sublime. And most of the time, I don't lead that exciting of a life. No, any other thing that happens all the time. Most of the time, I just read books. And I love what C.S. Lewis said about the power of reading. Listen to this. The man who is contented to be only himself, and therefore less of a self, is in prison. Mine own eyes are not enough for me. I will see through those of others. Reality, even seen through the eyes of many, is not enough either. I will see what others have invented. In reading great literature, I become 1,000 men, and yet remain myself. Like the night sky in the Greek poem, I see with myriad eyes, but it is still I who see. Here, as in worship, in love, in moral action, and in knowing, I transcend myself. Am never more myself than when I do. You know, you can't read a book that has not yet been written. And so all reading, and everyone in this room is a reader, all reading is therefore a grasping for the past. It is nostalgia. It's a nostos. It's a journey. Just like when Bilbo says, I'm going on an adventure. What is more exciting than opening a book that you've heard about, and for the first time you're reading the first page? Well, the only thing I can think of that's more exciting than that is opening a book for the second or the 10th or the 30th time. One that I know and love. That's nostalgia. I remembered, oh yeah, I got to reread that. Got to reread that. So here's the question that I use with my students when I live with them in Italy. Quid est homo? What is man? What are we? Man is the most beautiful thing the Lord of all creation ever designed and brought into existence. We are designed to be his reflection. This is what we are modeled after. But as Hamlet rightly recognizes, there's a little problem. What a piece of work is man. Remember these lines? Do you have nostalgia for these lines? Remember, what a piece of work is man. How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form and moving, how express and admirable. In action, how like an angel. In apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. And yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights not me. Man, what nostalgia we have for what we should be, what we once were before the fall. We have, in every sense of the phrase, forgotten ourselves entirely. Do you remember 2 years ago? Dave Goodwin asked me to speak at ACCS and do a talk there. Does anybody who was here remember what I said? It was about the term that I coined, poet aletheia, the making, the not forgetting, which you could also say means making truth, poet aletheia, right? I talked to you for 45 minutes or thereabouts about making the not forgetting, about the importance of unforgettableness of the important things. And what did you do? You forgot. So did I. I had to look up, what did I talk about back then? Should I refer to that? I don't know, right? And that's what we do. We're so like our students, it's hilarious. Don't tell them that, right? We forget. It's one of the primary results of the fall. And as I will show you over the next couple of minutes, Italy forgot too. See, our problem as human beings, as I said several years ago, and I'll say again, our problem has not changed in that 2 years or since the fall. Our problem has remained consistent. It is our forgetfulness. Our fallenness is like a forgetting of who and what and why we are. And it causes all manner of problems all the time. You ever notice how much of life is taken up by problem solving? Now, when I take people to Italy, we learn a lot more than just about art and philosophy and Latin and literature and architecture and stuff like that. We learn about problems. Students are shocked, right? And I've got this kind of little funny poster I use to kind of explain it to people. And they'll have a little national flag, right? And then it'll say problem, and then it's got a little arrow and shows how the people from that country deal with their problems, right? So it's got the German flag and it says problem, and an arrow goes straight across and says solution. Why? They're German, right? And Britain, get the little Union Jack, problem, tea time, solved. Right? Australia, problem. Put a few shrimp on the barbie, problems are solved. All right? Greece, problem. Everything is closed. Russia, problem, handcuffs, Siberia. Belgium is so cute. Belgium, solution leads to problem. North Korea, there's only one problem, but there are 4 solutions, and all of them are Kim Jong-un. All right? Israel, problem, fighter jet. Spain, problem, siesta, take a nap. All right? Ireland, problem, pint of Guinness, pint of Guinness, pint of Guinness, can't read the problem sign anymore, right? China, no problem. You know, America, large caliber pistol, right? Solution. It's probably a left-wing poster. I didn't mean that, but you know what I'm saying, right? And then the one for Italy at the end has the Italian flag, and it says problem, and it's got all these little squiggly lines running towards, you know, it goes past a little cup of cappuccino and a guy that's really frustrated and a bunch of people walking in circles, and it says 10 problems. Don't believe me? Come to Italy. How did these dear, dear people, and I love Italy and Italians, how did these dear people who conquered the world, produce the greatest literature and art and philosophy and architecture perhaps of all time, build the world's most extensive and long-lasting empire, get to the point where it takes 3 hours to pick up your rental car at the airport? I am not exaggerating. My wife said, did you already pay for it? Yes, I paid for it. When did you pay for it? 3 months ago. With a credit card? Yes. A credit card good? Yes. And they would give me, I said, I rented a van. Okay, we give you a Vespa with 1 wheel. No, I have 18 people and luggage. Okay, 2 wheels on the Vespa. No, that doesn't work. Okay, we give you a Fiat Panda, which is a car you can put in the back of your pocket. That doesn't work either. I rented a van. Okay, we have this on the record. We find the solution. This goes on for hours, right? My semester is half over in Italy before I get my car, and then it's a small station wagon, right? And they're so sweet. I've got a student, a wonderful young man, who's actually from Milan that studies at Master's University. He's taken my Calvin course and a few others, Marco Bovino, and he's lovely. And he has told me, I want to go back to Italy with your Summer in Italy program to study my culture because I don't know anything about it. You live in Milan? You can hop on a train and be in Rome in 2 hours, Florence in an hour? And he says, I don't know anything about, it's just a lot of old buildings and paintings. I know nothing about it. They forgot because they're human. Now, I live in Southern California, which is the weirdest place on the planet, and it strangely parallels Italy, right? You got this beautiful weather. You've got these very large, powerful cities. It's the cultural production capital of the world, just as ancient Rome was. There's massive wealth. It's really a kind of an empire. There is hideous and open immorality everywhere. There's a terrifying arrogance in a number of ways. It seems to be nothing but surface shows of glory. And eventually, of course, this will lead to a collapse into judgment. Both Southern California and Italy have these long coastlines, and you have this thing that I call coastality, right? There's a difference between coastal areas and interior areas, and nothing drives me more crazy as a guy who was born on the East Coast and now lives on the West Coast, a Virginia boy in Los Angeles, than the people who talk about, flyover country. And I hear it constantly where I am. I'm like, please just don't ever land there and infect it. Just stay away, because that's where everything is real. But coastality is where, you have, because of the bodies of water surrounding you, have so much cultural exposure with your ports, right? You want to see a variety of people. You do what Chaucer did as a little kid. He grew up on the docks in London where his father was the customs controller, right? You meet people from everywhere. You hear all these languages. You see all these customs. You see and hear all these different ways of thinking about things and looking at things. And in some ways, there's this tremendous kind of cultural transfer in coastal regions. Right? And what's interesting about Italy, because I've spent a lot of time on the coast of Italy, is much of the coast is characterized by a string of watchtowers, stone watchtowers that are all between 1,000 and 1,300 years old. Guess why? Have you noticed that you don't hear very much about terrorist attacks in Italy? Because they know where they are. It's a peninsula, like a stalactite that drops down off of Europe, and you can practically spit across to northern Africa and the Middle East. They know exactly what they're dealing with in the Islamist culture. And so they built watchtowers so they would know when they were coming. This is why Italy really doesn't have a serious Islamist problem, like its northern neighbors, the highly liberalized Germany and France, and maybe to a lesser extent, Britain. But Italy is beginning to forget even that now. There's 60 million Italians there in Italy, and they have a very strong, proud identity, right? There's a little local Italian restaurant in my town that I go to occasionally for dinner before an evening class, and it's called Maria's, and it's run by Maria. And I knew she was Italian when I started to learn a little Italian maybe a decade or so ago. I asked her, I said, "Oh, you're from Italy?" "Yes, I'm from Italy." You know, and I said, "Where are you from?" She said, "Rome!" And I was like, sorry. I should have sensed it, right? Rome, right? And you go to Florence or Venice, and there's such immense pride in being Florentine or Venetian or Paduan or something like that. You hardly even see anything like that quite in America. As a matter of fact, in individual little neighborhoods, in Italian cities and villages, they have this thing called campanalismo, right? The campanile is the bell tower of the church in your neighborhood, right? And campanalismo is pride in your bell tower. Really? How many Americans say, "Oh, I live next to this steeple," right? But there's such pride, such local pride and regional pride and city pride and national pride. And when you think of Italy or you think of movies with Italian people in it, you always think of a great big family and a mamma mia and a papa, and they're eating pasta and drinking gallons of wine, and there's kids and grandkids running around. It's the traditional gigantic Italian family, but it's been changing for about 50 years, right? It was always built around the ancient Roman idea, really, the paterfamilias, right? And then the powerful mother and this integrated, multi-generational family. Do you know that even now, with all the problems I'm about to tell you about, Italy has one of the lowest divorce rates in the world? It's 10% of marriages fail in Italy. That is absolutely amazing. That doesn't mean that they're all behaving inside of their marriages, but they do not divorce that very high rate, right? But just in the last 2 years, 30,000 less people got married than in the previous 2 years. In a population of 60 million people, that's a lot of people who are deciding not to get married. And they're mostly in the under 35 group. They're not getting married anymore. They just stopped getting married. They cohabitate and they move in with their parents because the economy is so bad that they have to move in with mom and dad. And so you've still got this multi-generational family, except the worst thing that's happening is they are in a birth rate spiral. For a developed country, 2.1 is the base replacement rate. In Italy right now, for the last 25 years, it's been 1.39. The Italians are vanishing. They have forgotten who they are. They love beauty, but they have forgotten what they are. The marriage rate has been cut in half since 1970. So you have the cohabitation, living with the parents. People who do get married tend to get married between 35 and 38, if at all. There's been a little uptick since 2008, but all that's really doing is slowing the rate of the fall. And when I walk people around in Italy, and I do it a lot, I spend almost a quarter of a year there now. When I walk students and people around in Italy, after a couple days, I say, okay, you're overwhelmed with the beauty of Florence and the glory of Rome and the absolutely magical nature of Venice, the floating city. What's missing? There's art, and architecture, and sculpture. It's completely overwhelming. What's missing? They're like, I don't know, I feel weird. Is it just, is it spiritually dead? Well, yeah, but America is spiritually dead too. I mean, everywhere is spiritually dead. The whole planet is spiritually dead, except for those who've been converted by the power of the Spirit. But what's missing? And then they realize there are no children. You can walk through the city of Rome or Florence or Venice for an entire day and not see a child. Happens all the time. And you don't even notice it. You forget that there are supposed to be children. Right? I mean, you feel like, you're in like the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang movie or something. Where are all the kids? They're down in a basement somewhere. They got this creepy guy that offers you ice cream and has a big hook nose. Right? Where are the children? But one of the saddest things that I notice about Italy is that so many of the locals who are so entranced with the idea of beauty, right? Milan is the fashion capital of the world. Florence, I think, is the most beautiful city in the world. Rome is astonishing. Venice is magical. Many of them walk around and they don't even understand their past culture, so much of which is wrapped around in beautiful human cultural production and expression. So what happened to Italy? Well, I had the line up there from Byron. I don't like Byron. I don't like his poetry. I don't like him as a person. But what a powerful line from, I think it's from Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. Italia, oh Italia. Of course, all the romantic poets went down to Italy, so that they could die young in Italy, because that was cool if you were romantic, Keats and Shelley and all those people. Italia, oh Italia, thou who hast the fatal gift of beauty, which became a funeral dower of present woes and past. Funeral dower of woes in the past, the beauty of Italy. Well, everybody wanted to sack, if you know your history, everybody wants to sack and invade and take over Italy, right? It's beautiful, it's fertile, there's lots of food, there's lots of milk, they make great cheese. They have the beautiful women and the architecture, they're very wealthy, they've got everything. No one says, hey, let's sack Siberia. Everyone went after Italy, and they're in the crossroads, and everyone went there. And the beauty of Italy and the power and the wealth and the glory was what the barbarians went after. What about the present woes of Italy? Well, if you want to have an exercise in confusion, look up Italian politics on Wikipedia. They have this kind of parliamentary system, and it functions as a republic, and there are about 20 parties that have power. Now, many of them only have 1 to 2% of the populace, right? And so what happens is everybody goes and votes. They're all politically active. Everyone goes and votes, and you'll get a few little parties that'll put a coalition together, and they might add up to maybe 20% of the people's support. So in Italy, 80% of the people are furious all the time. You think America's bad? Go to Italy. Every day I tell the students, count how many marches and demonstrations you see. Fascisti, comunisti, capitalisti, and they're marching back and forth and screaming and yelling, and then they all go have wine and everything is relaxed. Here's an example, Venice. Everyone goes to Venice because it's so beautiful. There's no place like it on earth. It's absolutely magical. It feels like it has to be a carefully constructed movie set. It can't be real. Does anybody live here? And the answer now is no. No one can afford it, right? The little muddy islands are very slowly sinking. Has a population of right around 50,000 in a square mile. 50,000, so it's fairly dense, but its average tourist load per day, the average is 55,000. So the population, and that's the average, that includes, like the day after Christmas. In the summer, it's several 100,000. The residents are outnumbered 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 1 some days. You can't move. Literally, you feel like a cow. Moving to, oh, this is really cool. Yeah, there's thousands of people from Kansas bumming up against me. Oh, here's a German over here. Right? You can't move down these narrow little alleyways. Right? Because once again, they're allowing the cruise ships to park, and they just dump out thousands of people. Right? And then years ago, they built a causeway to the mainland, and they've got trains and buses, and that causeway is kind of like an umbilical that's bringing in the tourist dollars and draining away the soul of the city. Far too crowded. It's almost hard to enjoy at some points. Right? But they all come to Venice because it's magically beautiful. They have a nostalgia. Oh, if only we could live in a place like this, where you opened your front door and you just got into your gondola. Right. And you went and bought a little pasta and some radicchio, and you went back to your little palazzo, and you watched the sunset over the Adriatic. It's magical. You feel like, as in many places in Italy, you feel like you're in some kind of Narnia or Hobbiton. I mean, I'm actually leaving for Italy in a matter of hours, spend the rest of the summer there. And this summer, I'm going to be walking around looking for a large, smiling mouse and Buzz Lightyear, because only a month ago, they started installing turnstiles on some of the streets and bridges and alleys. And when a certain number of tourists have gone through, they close it. Turnstiles. They have forgotten who they are. They have to control the hordes of people that are aching for beauty and want to see Venice or Rome or wherever before they die. Beauty and the nostalgia for it, and the nostalgia for the sublime and the beautiful and that which transports is overwhelmingly powerful, isn't it? Edmund Burke says, beauty is that which attracts and it invokes a desire, which is always a desire to possess. No man says, wow, she's beautiful, I don't want her. That doesn't happen. You don't go, that's a beautiful car, I don't want it. No lady walks into a house and says, this is a beautiful house, I'm not going to buy it. Not interested. Beauty attracts and it invokes a desire, and it's a desire to possess. But so often our desire to possess the object of beauty reverses on us, and instead it possesses us. And our desire becomes our prison, and the beautiful becomes a horror, and we are left grasping for this spectral, ghostly nostalgia that will never be fulfilled. It's the same thing with Virgil and Homer and Cicero and Ovid and Bronte and Shakespeare and Keats and Coleridge and Raphael and Michelangelo and Donatello and Beethoven and Dvorak and U2 and the Beatles and everything that human beings have produced that is beautiful and captivating and interesting and sublime. It's Puccini to Pascal and everything in between. Yes, even John Milton. Because when you find something beautiful, you want to possess it, and you want to keep it over and over and over again. You get your favorite book, you want to read it over and over again. Your favorite song, you know, at my age, you wear the LP grooves right down. But none of these things can ever truly, deeply, fully satisfy. That's why you listen to the same song over and over and over again. You look at the same paintings and the same sculptures and reread the same books. My daughter and I once got in the car, and because we're both fanatics for the paintings of Jan Vermeer, the 17th century Dutch guy, and we drove the 25 minutes down to the Getty Center in LA to see one painting. Vermeer, the girl with the letter at the window. Just one painting. I've been to the Getty 100 times. I'd seen everything. I'd run tours there. One painting my daughter and I went down to see. And we went there and we sat there and we looked at it for like 45 minutes. Then we got up and went to the cafe, had lunch, went back and sat there for another hour and drove home. And that was one of the best afternoons I've ever spent with my daughter. One painting, didn't even look at anything else. And I would go back to see it again. Every time I go to Venice, I stand for at least an hour in front of my all-time favorite painting, Giorgione's The Tempest. All the security guards know my name. It's that guy from Los Angeles again. Can you keep moving, sir? I'm like, no, I'm still trying to understand this weird painting. You want it again and again and again. This is why you reread the same books. This is why, admit it, you have watched the Lord of the Rings Super Nerdo extended DVD version 100 times. Or you've reread Narnia or Space Trilogy or whatever it is, right? It's wonderful. Beautiful. It transports you. You are transcendent out of yourself, but it doesn't fulfill your longing. That's why, wow, man, yeah, I think I do really like the Return of the King best. Okay, let's go back now and watch The Fellowship and watch it again and see what we think. Yeah, we just spent 12 straight hours. It never fulfills your longing. It can only magnify it. It's like drinking salty water. It just makes you more thirsty. It does not slake your thirst. No one ever experiences or wants to experience their favorite moment of beauty only once and say, okay, I'm done. It demands repetition. What man gets married, goes on a honeymoon, makes love to his wife one time and says, okay, that's it, I'm done? That's not being married. That's not love. That's not attraction. When you love something beautiful, it gets a hold of you. Some of us have taught the same content which we love deeply, deeply and dearly. We have taught that same content over and over and over again for years. Some of us have sung the same song and performed the same song over and over. Or we have acted, just think of Broadway actors who say the same lines night after night after night because they love it. And yet we're not bored. We want to keep doing it because we love it so, because we are enraptured by the beauty. But let me ask you this. What do you love the most? I love Virgil. I love Ovid. I love Shakespeare. Love Milton. I've read Paradise Lost hundreds of times. I read Huckleberry Finn. I actually just did it for, I think, the 93rd time. It's my favorite novel. You can start a sentence. Try me afterwards if you want. You can start a sentence from Huckleberry Finn. I will finish the page for you out of my head. I love it that much. But let me ask you this. Do I love Jesus more than Virgil? Do our students see us getting more excited about Shakespeare or the book of James? Do you get more excited about Narnia than the Bible, Lord of the Rings over the Pentateuch, Sistine Chapel over the one that it points to? It's the easiest and most subtle transfer of affections in the world. And the really frightening question is, are we at risk of modeling what is functionally idolatry for our students? See, we do what we do in these classical schools because we've got the good stuff. Our kids get excited because they read real books, they listen to real music, they look at and study great paintings. They don't go on a ski trip for senior trip, they go to Italy or something like that. They get excited because all humans hunger for real beauty. We have this nostalgic love for loveliness, and all of us sense that we've somehow lost the real loveliness, even though we know it's our birthright. That is why this movement has exploded, because it works, because it's real. This is why we can so fully capture ready young souls who would wither on the vine in many other schools. This is why we can so fully capture so many of these young, ready souls in a good classical Christian classroom, because we still believe in beauty as well as goodness and truth and a lot of other wonderful things. And these things resonate with the human soul on a cosmic level. We have drilled down deep into the souls of our students, and we have hit a well that is responding to all the incredible things that there are to know. This is the dangerous thing about the universe. It's interesting. And even in our fallenness, we have created so much that is worthy of attention. And therein lies the terrible danger, because as Homer knew, beauty is never just beauty. It is beauty, terrible beauty, and thousands are slain. We must draw our beloved students in by cultivating their affections towards the beauty of beauty, the goodness of goodness, and the truth of truth, all of which are bound up together, always and only in the perfect coherence of the incarnate and eternal person of Jesus Christ alone. Remember what Martin said: I am much afraid that the schools will prove the very gates of hell unless they diligently labor in explaining the Holy Scriptures and engraving them in the hearts of youth. I advise no one to place his child where the Scriptures do not reign paramount. Every institution in which means are not unceasingly occupied with the Word of God must be corrupt. If you teach about a painting or a song or a poem or an epic or logic or philosophy or biology or anatomy or arithmetic or geometry or calculus or history or political philosophy or anything else without bringing it around to the Word of God, you will turn your students into idolaters, because none of those things are convicting and none of them transform you like Scripture does. And let us not forget wonderful Saint Basil, who says, the world is a work of art set before all for contemplation, so that through it the wisdom of Him who created it should be known. Calvin talks about how the world is the theatrum mundi, the theater of the world. It's a theater, it's a theatron, the Greeks used to say, a theatron, a seeing place. It is a place for God to put His glory on display. But you got to learn how to watch the play. You don't want to meet the actors. You want to meet the director. So the title of my talk was The End of Classical Christian Education. And yes, as Benedict says in Much Ado, there's a double meaning in that. Classical Christian education could either rapidly collapse into cynical secularism or dead religiosity. We see this with individual students, so we could look at it individually or corporately as a whole movement. I'm really talking about the whole movement. We've all watched some of our most wonderful students just go into bad places. Or classical Christian education could reach its goal, which must always be conversion and lasting, growing commitment to true Christian wisdom. You understand, your job is to be in place for the Holy Spirit to use you and your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience, your words, your actions, your love, your care, in order to help facilitate the conversion of your students. If you graduate a non-convert, if our schools graduate those who are not believers, we have failed. When Doug says we want to give them the tools of learning that are sharp, he does not mean we want to give them swords and spears with which they injure themselves and others. If we move towards the former, if we move towards disaster, if this collapses, it doesn't mean it's not successful visibly, but if it collapses and falls away from what the Lord would have us do, if we move towards that former state, I think that it will be the love of classical beauty in all of its forms which will have been the primary path towards that kind of perdition. If we move towards the latter, if we continue to do what we're doing, and I think we're doing it pretty well, if we move towards the latter, well, that's just steadfast devotion to the one who created beauty in the first place. If you teach, if you're an administrator, if you're a founder or a head of school, or if you're a board member, if you're just an interested parent, and you love what we're doing, classical Christian education, I exhort you to keep your love focused on our good God, to love His beauty, the beauty of holiness, which above all other beauty is truly and immutably and perfectly beautiful. The reason that you respond so strongly to the beauty of Bellini's oil paintings, or Brunelleschi's architecture, or Michelangelo's sculpture, or mathematical proofs in the theorems of Galileo, or the glorious design of the wild variety of plants and animals on earth, and the infinite and indescribable beauty of the heavens, is because all of this was made by Him to serve as a compass, to point to Him, and only Him. Dante understood his guide, the shade of Virgil, could not proceed into the heavens because he was a pagan. All of this serves as a compass pointing to Him, and only Him, and always Him, eternally, eternally, eternally. But when you get to your destination, you can stop looking at the compass. I think God is very powerfully at work in this movement. Can't you tell? Can't you see it? I bet I could pull any one of you from the audience. You can come up here and talk for an hour straight. We don't have time for that, but I could. And you could talk about what you have seen. We thought our school was going to close. We thought we were going to lose this teacher. I thought I couldn't continue with this career. I thought my students hated Virgil, hated God, and hated me. Then I got this letter. We've all seen it over and over and over. How many times a year, how many times a semester, how many times a month, a week, a day, an hour do you see his hand moving? I've been talking for a number of years in public about a vision that I have for 10 classical schools in Southern California, right? 1 out of 10 Americans lives in California. 1 out of about 20, 21, 22 lives in my county. We have 1 school in Los Angeles County that's up and functioning and healthy and growing and going along. And then Gene Kim School down in San Diego area is a fabulous school. And there are 1 or 2 wonderful ones that are kind of in between, and they're working and they're growing, they're doing some fabulous stuff right there. But it's so hard when we live in a culture where everything is wildly overpriced, everything is incredibly shallow in Southern California. People are so anti-Christian. It's very hard. It's not like a salmon trying to swim up a stream. It's a salmon at the bottom of Niagara Falls going, wow, that's really tall. How are we going to do this? How am I going to pay my teachers? How are we going to get a facility? How are we going to convince people to put people classical? Classical what? I mean, I live in the land of Botox. People are not interested in St. Basil. We grow really nice basil, we put on our pasta, and it's lovely. So I've spoken about this many times. A number of you have heard me talk about it, but I'll tell you what, I'm getting phone calls and emails. Just in the last week, heard from someone that wants to start another school in the San Diego area, south of us. And I've always talked about Southern California because I think, well, Southern California, we're pretty bad, but North San Francisco, are you kidding me? Oh man, I don't even go up there anymore. I'm afraid of the lightning bolt to hit. Contacted this week had a conversation with some people who have got a prayer group, and they are building a movement towards a classical school in the city of San Francisco. You pray for those people. And some of you should probably go work for them. I sent her an email the other day, kind of discouraged, yeah, we've got this, plan, and we're doing this, and here's our list of things we're praying for, and it's really, kind of intimidating. And I said, don't forget the greatest revival of all time was carried out by an unwilling prophet in Nineveh. We know who's in charge. But look, we've got to get more serious about the supply chain of faculty, or it won't last. And if it does, it won't get that much better. That's why we've designed this degree program at Masters. So please, send me your best. Send us your best. And there are a lot of other great schools. You get your kids into places like Grove City and Biola Torrey Honors, and you send them to Hillsdale. You send them to these schools that understand what we're doing. You send your best to them so that they can come back and reseed the movement, because in a couple of years, we all going to be gone. You got to build a legacy. You got to understand, almost everything is against us. Almost everything we can see is against us. As I said in that video that they played on Wednesday morning, the devil hates you, the world hates you, all the flesh hates you, hates what we're doing, hates it, hates it, hates it. Almost everything. But we will fight, and we will go on. We will grow, and we will cause the enemy to tremble, because our commander made all things, rules all things, guides all things, and disposes all things for his glory and our good. Amen? That's right. If the government tries to shut us down, we will continue nevertheless. If secularism attempts to co-opt our work, we will reject it wholeheartedly. If the devil himself shows up at our schools with a gun, an idea, a temptation, we will reject him, because we wear the full armor of the living God, and we carry the knowledge of the holy, and we know the wisdom of the world in its power and its limitations. We will fight for the minds of our children. We will fight for our young people and our young adults when we send them off to colleges and universities, whether secular, Christian, or confused about what they are. And their professors will tremble in awe before young people who can truly think with clarity, vigor, and confidence. And we will fight and we will work. We will stay past the setting of the moon, grading papers, correcting equations, practicing translation, and praying for and hoping for and dreaming for our next generation. We will do this with growing confidence. I'm going to channel Gary Oldman channeling Winston Churchill. We will fight with growing confidence in the classrooms, in the offices, in the boardrooms, because our commander commands everything and he can be followed fearlessly. No matter what your eschatology, all Christians have always known that in the end, the most beautiful one, Jesus, the real head of school, wins. Enjoy the rest of your summer.